Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to the second episode of the Lockdown podcast / videocast. As some people have been correcting me that technically it's a videocast because they're videos that I'm uploading. So welcome to the second episode. I'm honored to be joined by Joe Binder. Joe is an entrepreneur, is a LinkedIn influencer. He read geography at Cambridge University before going on to start his own business at the age of 21, was featured at Forbes. He's got some incredible stats. To mention a few, got over 11,000 LinkedIn followers, 22,000 YouTube subscribers, and A Day in the Life famously got over 250,000 views on YouTube. So definitely a young influencer. Joe, welcome.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for the lovely introduction.
Not at all. I feel honoured to have you. Thanks very much for joining, Joe. I suppose if you don't mind, it'd be kind of good to start back at Cambridge, because I suppose that's where it kind of kicked off. So geography. So talk to the viewers about why geography. Was this something that you kind of fell into, or did you always know that you were going to study at Cambridge? Did you always know that you were going to study geography? Let's kick off there, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so before we even get to geography, I was never meant to go to Cambridge. I was the dumb kid at school.
Okay.
My boys had banter for everyone, our little friendship group, and mine was that I was in 3B, which was set 6. So it was never really expected of me to go to Cambridge or to do well in any coursework or exams whatsoever. So my entire kind of academic experience started around year 8. Most people start in year 7, but for some reason things just didn't click for me then. And once I was put into bottom sets in year 8, I was like, yo, what is going on? I need to work my arse off. I need to show the teachers that I can do work that's harder than this. I can learn at a faster rate. And I think that's where something in my mind was kind of triggered. And I was like, okay, this is not good enough. Everyone's better than me. I need to do more. I need to be more. So I had this 4 or 5 year span at school where it was a case of being put in a set for maths and for English and for science, and then directly telling the teachers that I want to be moved up a set, and then them always saying the same thing. Look, you're in a year group of 300 people. It's very difficult to do that. A lot of admin involved. You really need to show that you shouldn't be here for us to move you out. So same process every time, having to ace tests, work my ass off, really show that I was giving it my all. So then further down the line, university came into sight, and there's a lot of back and forth in my head about whether or not I should apply to Oxford or Cambridge. And I just didn't really back myself enough to do either. And I remember I had so many conversations with my geography teacher, Miss Ruzi, and she would just literally speak at me saying, Joe, you are bright enough. You are clever enough. You are enough. And I would just be like, am I really? So there was a lot of that. But after a while, I started to realize that even though I had certain experiences at school where people said I was thick or I really felt stupid in front of certain teachers, ultimately I would be the only person taking those exams and going into that interview. So I decided on applying to Cambridge, got in to study geography. It was a choice of geography or French for me because they were my favourite 2 subjects. But I realised later on that I didn't want to do 3 years, or maybe even 4 years actually, of studying French literature. It wasn't really my vibe. So I went for geography. So in a very long spiel, there is an answer to your question. That's the university academic journey.
So that's really, really interesting. So do you think that Cambridge came as a result of you wanting to prove people wrong? Or had you known in the back of your mind that you always wanted to go to a top institution because you were thinking quite far down the line about, being able to open doors, about what you do after university? Where did it come from?
I think it was the idea of Cambridge and Oxford being the best and me at the time being the worst. I think for me, it made sense to just go and do as best as I could. And that meant going to the best university. It wasn't really important about the subject. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do after. I think it was just a case of wanting to do the best that I possibly could.
Okay. Well, and I think that's great. And I think a lot of people will be watching this probably at that period of time where they're probably considering their university options. They probably maybe have gone through something similar to what you went through in terms of, you know, a lot of people running them off. So I hope that people can watch this and actually think, you know what, like naturally there will be, because I think similar to you, I had a lot of teachers that were pretty dismissive and said, you know, I don't think you'll go to university. I don't actually think you'll get A levels at all. But actually, like you say, just with a little bit of persistence and maybe, do you have one teacher that was really your champion? Because normally that tends to happen, right? You normally have one teacher that really is the kind of go-to person that motivates you and drives you. Was that your geography teacher or?
Miss Ruzi was definitely the one who helped push me over the line between not applying and applying. But I mean, I was a bit of a teacher's pet. I loved school. Okay. I loved the teachers. I would come in to a geography lesson 15 minutes after it started with a huge grin on my face and a huge smile on my face, and the teacher would somehow let me in without telling me off, whereas other people would get told off. And I would call out and I would, you know, be a bit naughty, but never to the extent where it was disrespectful or it really, really disrupted the lesson. So it was always that fine line between a bit of banter and having respect for the teacher, and then also recognizing that I was a student and they were trying to run a lesson. So I really liked school. A bunch of different teachers that I liked. One of them, Mr. Luca, is he's like a legend at GFS. Everyone knows about Mr. Luca. I think he's left now.
For anyone watching from GFS, I'm sure they'll know.
Yeah, but some very funny stories with him. It's like classic. So I'm not going to go into it because maybe it's not the kind of thing that I should speak about on a podcast.
I'm sure you've got your reasons for not going into it. Okay, so interesting. So geography. How was Cambridge? Because I suppose most people watching that haven't attended Oxford or Cambridge will have their perceptions of Oxbridge, rightly or wrongly. From someone that went there and someone that was clearly pretty involved. We'll get to your YouTubing in a second. But how was it for someone that obviously studied there?
So if I can kind of rephrase that question and say, if I were thinking about applying, but I were kind of insecure, and if I didn't think I was clever enough to go there, what would I have told myself? Because I think that's kind of what you're asking. And if I could now look back at myself and say anything about Oxbridge, about applying, it would be, first of all, bro, chill. What are you doing? Calm down. It's okay. And then it's not what you think. It's not just hordes and hordes of people who are like the most intelligent people in the world. There's a ton of privilege there, first of all. And I'm definitely within that group for a bunch of different reasons. But there's also so many different types of people. It's like any university in that you've got the people who love drama. You've got the people that love drugs and get high the whole time. Like, that exists there as well. You've got the people who love sport. You've got the people who love clubbing, who love academia, who love startups, whatever it is. There are these pockets, like any university, like any social community, of different types of people, and you will be able to find your kind of little home within that. I think that's the main thing that I would say to myself if I could, because I was really, really worried about not fitting in. I thought everyone would have been to a private school. Everyone would be really fluent and articulate in the way they spoke, and I didn't feel like I ever was. And I just thought everyone was going to outsmart me at every opportunity, but that didn't really happen. It wasn't really necessary for people to do that. Nobody's out to get you. And I realized that once I was there, and I was like, oh, actually, it's pretty chill here.
I think that's really, really important that you've driven that message across, because I do think that there is, unfortunately, rightly or wrongly, that perception that, will I fit in? Am I clever enough? Will I have to speak in a different way? Will I be super anxious all the time because, you know, everyone's here and I'm over here in terms of intellectual ability or hobbies or class, etc. So it's really good to hear that actually there will probably be some students that are similar to you and you can fit in. So that's really, really good to hear. Okay, so while at Cambridge, obviously a YouTuber into your YouTubing, uploading, you know, various YouTubing videos. Were you always interested in social media, or is that something that kind of happened over your university period? You know, had you met someone else that was doing YouTubing? Like, talk to me about, how did your YouTubing begin, I suppose?
Yeah, so I was always obsessed with social media. I would share everything on Facebook. I would always be really active on whatever BBM groups there were at the time. I was always on Twitter. And I had no problem with sharing personal things. I would just, spit out everything. And a lot of people would just ask why I would do that, but I just didn't really, there were no barriers there for me. I didn't care what I shared. I've always been quite an open person. But then it got to a stage where I was in Berlin. I was doing a 2-month internship at a tech firm called Rocket Internet. And I was obsessed with this guy called Gary Vaynerchuk, Gary V, who everyone knows as like the king of personal branding. And at the time, I kind of backed myself a little bit with social media. I just thought, how difficult can it be to build an audience? And I heard him talk about it so much, and I was like, actually, maybe I can start a random page on Instagram, and I can take photos of myself wearing like a bandana so you can't see it's me, and I can go to Tempelhofer, which was this like abandoned airport in Berlin, and I could take the same photo and build 10,000 followers in like a week. I reckon I could do that. And that was just like a one really random, rogue, weird idea, which then quickly transitioned to, okay, if I'm going to do something, I may as well do something properly. And I share everything anyway. I know that whatever I do in the future will benefit from me having a Facebook-like audience where people know me to a degree. They want to support me to a degree. If I was doing a sponsored run, for example, I would share it there and people could probably sponsor me. I thought, okay, now is the time where I can actually scale what I'm currently doing on Facebook to my friends and family on a platform like YouTube, essentially. And so it was that kind of transition in my head where I was like, so I can be a YouTuber. And then I downloaded Tinder and started to growth hack my way to my first 100 or so YouTube subscribers. I don't think I've actually spoken about that before.
Okay, talk to me more about that.
So I thought I needed to get people following me for other people to want to follow me in the first place. So as well as all the sharing on Facebook, I was doing a lot of what I would call growth hacking, guerrilla marketing, if it even counts as that, because it wasn't very successful. But I essentially tried to match with as many people as I could on Tinder, guys or girls, and basically just promote my YouTube channel, literally. And it wasn't just, hey, watch my video. It was, hey, do you watch YouTube? That kind of thing. So it's really, really time intensive, not very successful. But I guess it's good to experience spending so much time on something like that. Because, I mean, you learn from it ultimately, and it was a silly move.
But I suppose in fairness to you, it's super creative. And I think people will be watching kind of thinking, you know what, like, I may have done that. I may have done something similar. Maybe I would have used any kind of app to kind of get my personal brand out there. So I suppose it's definitely a new thing. I've not heard of people trying to get their YouTube channel out on Tinder, but I mean, it's good that you could be honest about that. That's really, really interesting. So what about, people starting YouTube, there is this kind of sense of, again, being scared to start it. Am I going to get some hate, some negative critique? Like, what was your experience with negativity? Because clearly, obviously, to put yourself out there, you kind of knew that people would like it, and there would be a bunch of people that didn't like it. So how did you deal with the negative element of YouTubing?
Yeah, I think anyone who puts themselves out there to create videos on a platform like YouTube or TikTok, where you're really putting yourself out and creating like videos about yourself, will go through a stage where they realize that nobody around them really thinks what they're doing is cool, and they just need to grapple with that. So like, I was plastering my stuff across my Facebook channels and Twitter and everywhere for, I think it was a period of 30 days. I did it daily. And it was literally just like, no one cared. No one gave a shit. Like, why would people care about what I'm doing in Berlin? It wasn't very interesting. But ultimately, there were a lot of people who would support it at the start. So I got 120 likes on the first post I did on Facebook. But then obviously the next day I did another post on Facebook. We still got 80 likes. And then the next day I got 60. And, 1 week in it was getting like 5. And I got really worried. And I was like, why does nobody like me? Why is no one going to watch my videos? People must think what I'm doing is really stupid. And then a friend actually gave me some really good advice. She's like, well, now I guess she's quite controversial. She wasn't back then. Her name's Caroline Calloway. And I asked her, how do I grow my audience? And she said, look, as much as your friends love you, they don't love vlogs. They're not your target audience. Stop sharing this stuff on your Instagram. Stop plastering it across your Facebook because you're selling to the wrong people. Find out who your audience are. Find out where they spend their time and then approach them, which was solid advice. But going back a second to what you actually asked, which was about the response, most people didn't really say anything to me. I knew what some people thought, but I didn't really care. And then eventually, close friends had the chat with me, basically to say that I do this voice and it makes me sound like such an idiot and I've got to stop it. So there were little bits of feedback that came through my close friends. And then some other stuff. Oh, here's one for you. There's a voice again. So there was one point where I just got absolutely obsessed and every single thing I spoke about was about my vlog. A friend could have just had a really exciting, day and I just wouldn't be that interested. And it took me quite a while to realize, and I'm quite like this if I'm completely honest, because I just get obsessed with the projects that I work on. And it took some quite difficult conversations with some of my friends who basically just had to stop me in my tracks and be like, Joe, but I don't care. You've spoken about your vlog for the past month. I've got things going on that I want to speak about. I want to ask you for advice for stuff. It's not all about you. And that's all you care about. It's all you speak about. So that was quite uncomfortable, but obviously it had to happen. I had to learn from it. Felt bad about it, but it's what it is.
So for you, actually, your friends were helpful because clearly if they hadn't have had those chats about, the way that you come across on your videos, the way that you're treating your friends in terms of not really caring about them and their projects, etc. Do you think that would have carried on? Do you think even today that you'd still be that kind of person that only cares about, your personal brand, your YouTube, your life, and not really anyone else's stuff?
Yeah, it was definitely helpful to get that insight from them. And I recognize that it's a difficult thing for them to have to do. It's always difficult if your friend is starting to become a bit of a dick and you know it and you know it's going to affect them. You have the choice, and it's usually going to take one of your closest friends to have that conversation with you, because the good friends around can kind of watch it happen. They're not too overly invested in your life and they don't have to be the one to break that awkward news, but it takes a really good friend to have to do it, and I'm grateful for that.
So what about your parents? Have they been supportive about your YouTubing? Because I suppose there's this perception that kind of the older generation don't really get social media, don't embrace it, sees it as quite a negative thing, see it as a kind of catalyst for mental health problems, etc. Have they been generally supportive, or were they initially not supportive and they've kind of got to a point where they're more supportive now? Talk to me about that.
Yeah, I think when I started it, obviously I was away from home in Berlin for 2 months. I think my mum was quite pleased that she had some kind of contact with me. She could see what I was up to.
Okay.
But as it went on, I just think my dad wasn't that interested. He's not that interested in social media or vlogs, and my mum wasn't either. So they were always really supportive, always have been, but there was never a really clear relationship there in terms of how interested they were in the videos. It was never really that much of a thing.
Okay. So I suppose moving on to your time at university. So you kind of interned at various organizations, Rocket Internet, the Ivy, M&C Saatchi, Boston Consulting Group, etc. Was that kind of from the perspective of doing different things, understanding what you liked, what you didn't like, or did you kind of want to do those things to kind of know that you kind of got on your CV with the intention always to never go and work for those organizations? Because I suppose most people watching this at university will be thinking, the corporate route is for them. They need to intern in these organizations. So what was the kind of justification for you, interning at all these organizations? I suppose that's my question.
So can I be really annoying and say something else about that before I answer the main question?
You go for it, Joe.
So as you're reading those really big brand names, well-known companies out, I was like, geez, so I really interned there. Wow, that's quite cool. And I think for me, the guy who's actually there to think that is there's something going on there. Ultimately, branding is just, sure, it's great, but at the end of the day, there's a lot of bullshit there. Now, I did the placements in those places. I did the work, and I got the places, but ultimately it looks so much better when it's read out in the way that you just did there, or when it's on a CV, or when you have a photo of yourself in front of the BCG logo, whatever it is, like there's such a divide. There's such a disparity between what it's actually like and then what it looks like when you're on the other side. And I don't know, I think about perception a lot and making sure that I'm being really honest with how like people perceive me. I put a lot of effort into trying to be honest about what I do. And yes, like those names sound really great, but ultimately, did I learn a lot at M&C Saatchi? Did they treat me like a really, valued person who was there to learn a lot? Somebody who applied to be there and who put a lot of work into that application? Not so sure. But there were other things that I got there that I picked up a load of kind of industry lingo, a load of soft skills, how to really chat to people whilst you're making coffee, things like that, which are really important. But I just think it's like crucial to say that things always sound better like that than they actually are. I hope that doesn't sound too negative in terms of not at all.
Yeah, no, at all. I think it's probably an important message. Like, don't get me wrong. There's two sides to every story. There will be individuals that have to go through those steps to come out the other side and know it's not for them. But clearly there will be a lot of people that actually that's their career path. I suppose, my question then is based on what you just said, knowing now what you know, going back, would you have gone through those internships again if you could do your time again at university?
Yes. And now I sound, because ultimately the brand name of M&C Saatchi allowed me to get the internship at the next place, which allowed me to get the residential at the next brand, which gave me a certain credibility to get a one-off consultancy gig whilst I was still at Cambridge, because I clearly knew about social media because I had started a variety of different social media campaigns at uni, but then I also had done an internship with a really big advertising firm. So that got me into like a consultancy gig, which got me then into another, which then built my credibility from there. So I definitely can do what I did. But I guess it would be with the hindsight of knowing that I'm not going to pick up a huge amount of hard skills whilst I'm there. But perhaps the main value of being there is the brand value, which will open the door to the next brand.
And that's super interesting. Okay. So we're coming to the end of your time at Cambridge now. So a 2-1, were you always someone that was trying to get a first? Were you bothered about the grade that you got? What was, I suppose you were doing lots of things, right? So maybe in your mind, it was getting an okay qualification to move on, or were you one of those students who was like, no, I have to get a first kind of thing?
Yeah, my director of studies was really shocked when he found out that I got a 2-1. He was like, I don't know how you managed to do that, mate. And I was like, do that to me. But yeah, so I wasn't that motivated to actually do really well in my geography degree, just because I'd found social media. I had a big blog project that I was obsessed with at the time before I started my YouTube, which was in the final year. And then obviously I started the YouTube, so I was obsessed with that. And work for me was always like the thing that kind of had to be done in order for me to do the other stuff. So it would have been nice to have got first, but towards the end of Cambridge, I was just so focused on extracurricular stuff that I wasn't really giving it my all, and I wasn't that passionate about it.
And I think, and clearly there is the conversation about, actually whether getting a first actually opens any more doors. And clearly for you, the amount of stuff that you'd done by that point, I suppose whatever grade you would have got, you would have gone on to do the same things. So interestingly enough, maybe actually the grade wasn't a determining factor. Okay. So after leaving Cambridge, at that point on graduation day, what was going through your head? You'd been a YouTuber, you'd intern at lots of organizations. At that point, did you know that you were going to start your own organization and become an entrepreneur? Or did you still feel a little bit anxious about the next steps and thought, I need to go and get a job and I need to continue to develop my soft skills, experience, etc.?
Yeah, you're so right. I was really anxious. I had no idea what I was going to do. I had no clue. I always knew that I wanted to start up a business. When I was at school, I'd import headphones from China and sell them to kids on the bus. I would import BlackBerry phone cases. I would sell sweets at school. That whole, that whole thing. I would do that. And I knew that I wanted to have my own business, but I didn't really know what that looked like yet. I didn't really have the language to articulate what that could be either. So it took a fair amount of time of not knowing, and then eventually thinking, oh, okay, I'm going to be a full-time YouTuber, and that's going to get me there. I was really naive about what kind of income I could get from, I don't know, 15,000 subscribers at the time. And also how satisfied I would feel on a daily basis. And then, of course, the culture of being a quote YouTuber, what that actually meant. I was just really, really ignorant about the entire thing. And it took me having to try that to realize that I needed to get an actual job. Otherwise, like, I'd be sitting at home tearing my hair out.
Yeah. Okay, so that's interesting. So talking about getting an actual job. So you obviously went to go and work for a social media marketing company. 6 months in, then decided that it wasn't for you. Was that because you decided actually that you could do things better? You understood more, you wanted to do your own thing? Or was it more that it comes back to what you're talking about? You've always known that you had that entrepreneurial flair. Like, was it more one or the other kind of thing?
Yeah, so the company ran out of money.
So,
So,
oh, right.
booted out. I got let go.
So fine, okay.
Let go. The company moved to Italy, and clients weren't happy at all. I think there was some disputes there. There are a lot of stories that happened within that startup, but I met some really, really cool people. Learned so much. Also had a really good time. It was really cool. There were like no training wheels at all. And so, yeah, you just learned loads, made a lot of mistakes. But yeah, so I think I kind of knew that my role there wasn't secure.
Okay.
After a few months of being there. So I started thinking about whether or not I could create my own kind of version of what they did, which is essentially really simple model, marketing startup. You get paid whatever, $1,000 a month on a 6-month basis. And from that $1,000 a month, you know that you're going to be creating 20 photos and you're doing however many photo shoots and copywriting work, whatever it is. So that part was easy to understand. The idea of pitching to a client was easy to understand. I learned a lot about how not to pitch and what not to promise and things like that. So by the time, I got kind of let go, fired, however we phrase it, by the time the company let everyone go, I was like, okay, right, now's my time. I need to actually do this. So that's where it all started.
Okay. And I suppose in some way, maybe they did you a favor, forcing you, to kind of actually kick your own thing off, right? Because I think there's a tendency for a lot of people in a job with that salary to not want to take the leap into entrepreneurship because it's an unknown, they're nervous, for how long before I can actually support myself financially, etc. So for you, I suppose you kind of pushed into it, right?
Yeah, exactly. They definitely forced my hand a little. I think that's a really good point. It's really easy to be comfortable and to be complacent. I don't know if you've ever felt that with like uni stuff, with work stuff.
Yeah, no, I've definitely felt that. But I think it's interesting. You definitely can feel that. It doesn't always mean that you'll do something about it, right? So, whether or not in the future I decide to take the same leap to start my own business, I think it's a bigger leap than, let's say, going from corporate to a startup. And I think that's students watching this will be having those kind of things in their heads, because especially now during lockdown, there are those conversations happening. Should I start my own business? Should I quit my corporate job, go work for a startup? Should I go traveling, etc.? So I suppose the point here is sometimes having your hand forced can be a good thing and not a negative thing. So that's super interesting. Okay, so now we arrive at you starting WOW. So for the people watching that haven't heard of your company, why don't you kind of give an introduction as to what WOW is and why you set it up?
Sure. So we build personal brands for founders and CEOs. So we work with a lot of high profile people, like the kind of people you see on Dragon's Den. We help them increase their social media influence and following. And then we also work with a lot of small businesses whose founders and CEOs really need to communicate what their clear mission is, why they're different to other companies in a similar industry. A lot of the time they want to show how great a company they are as well, so that people want to work there, things like that. So it's essentially a branding piece for founders and CEOs. that's what we do in a nutshell. Was that the question?
Yeah. And I suppose the kind of follow up to that is, what made you want to start a personal branding company? Was this always intention because of the time that you'd spent building your own personal brand and the fact that you knew that having a personal brand was strong, or what's the kind of rationale as to why you started a personal branding company?
Yeah, so when I was at that first startup after university, I saw what the retainers with our clients looked like and what we were doing in return. And I saw a big opportunity in the LinkedIn marketing side of things that they were doing. I couldn't understand why the people writing the content weren't good writers, but they were just kind of given a task to write something. They weren't talented writers at all, but they were writing it. And there wasn't much strategy behind it. But yeah, there was somebody willing to pay for it because they knew what the value could be. And we were aware of the value. We just hadn't really nailed as a company what the logistics for creating that value were. So I thought, okay, that's going to be one of the first things I focus on, is creating really good content on LinkedIn using really talented writers. So one of the first things I did when I started was joined a load of Facebook groups for Russell Group universities, Bristol, Durham, Exeter, I think a few others. Went onto their English literature groups, basically said, hey guys, I've got freelance writing work if you're interested. Took a few people on, told them what a typical good LinkedIn post looks like, and then went from there. So that was a reason why I really wanted to start on LinkedIn. I thought there was a lot of opportunity. I saw how much engagement my post would get compared to any other platform. Like, it was insane. It still was really, really high. And then also going back a few steps, like I have Gary Vaynerchuk in the back of my head the whole time. I see the value for me. That's a great thing to push as the main service. It took a while to really niche down and focus on individuals because the case studies to prove it. But then once I started working with Jake Khan and he announced that we were together and gave me a testimonial, that then opened the doors to work with other people like that and more people like that. So in terms of our credibility and our case studies to show that we can actually work with that caliber of individual, that helped massively. So we were able to oh my goodness. There's that's what happened.
Okay, that's I suppose that's extremely interesting, and I think a lot of people watching this will now understand the reason as to why you started it. So LinkedIn now is such an interesting platform because over the last few years it's become a platform that me myself, for example, use more than any other platform. Like, I find myself looking at LinkedIn for hours every single day. Why do you think, Joe, that LinkedIn now is much more of an important platform than it was, say, 3 or 4 years ago? Hey, so do we have...
So the question was, why is LinkedIn more important now than 4 years ago, right?
Yes, that was the question, yeah.
So I think there have been a lot of changes made to LinkedIn, made to how user-friendly it is, what kind of people they're trying to bring onto the platform, how they're trying to do that. And essentially, people have realized the opportunity to create content, for it to go onto the newsfeed, to get engagement, and then to be plastered across the newsfeed of whoever's engaged with it. So there's a real opportunity to essentially go viral, or just to get really good reach and views on your content. I don't think that existed in the same way in the past. People saw LinkedIn more as a static place where you store your CV online, essentially, and you'll get a message from recruiters offering you new positions, and people would essentially update it sometimes. But then this transition happened, more people started posting on the platform, and all of a sudden people took note of that, because they realized, thank God, we can now post about our work anniversary on social media and not get a load of eye roll emojis because we're posting on Facebook and nobody cares, or we're posting on Instagram and people aren't there for that kind of content. So once some people started posting, I think there was this real domino effect. More and more people saw it, more marketers realized that you could get really high engagement if you're posting onto the newsfeed, and people started to change the way they behaved on the platform. There was a lot more scrolling, a lot more consumer content, and ultimately, I think it just took off in that way. So now you have this opportunity to become like a professional influencer. Like the Instagram influencers had their great, amazing run, and I'm sure that's still going on. I don't know that much about that world now, but ultimately there's this new opportunity for, like the famous CEO, the social CEO, that kind of thing, I think.
And okay, and I suppose that will continue, and a lot of people watching this will know that LinkedIn is probably becoming something that they check more and more, probably more than any other platform, like in the morning, in the evening, etc. So that may that continue, hopefully. Joe, I'm interested, as a 21-year-old starting your own business, like what was the hardest thing that kind of came up? Because I know a lot of people watching this at 21, 22 can't even imagine starting their own business. So for someone that's been through it, what would you say is the kind of hardest, maybe one or two things that you came across as a young entrepreneur?
Yeah, one thing I really struggled with was understanding what to work hard on. Like, I'm fine working hard on something. I can put a ton of energy, ton of time doing something, even if it's really monotonous and repetitive. But when I started my business, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what to work hard on. So I remember at one point, for some reason, I was trying to create a blog for my website, and I was trying to get an intern to write all of the blog articles, knowing that the content wasn't very good, knowing that that wasn't going to, well, not knowing that that wasn't going to give me any kind of traction. But I was spending loads of energy on my blog of a website that I kind of knew I wasn't going to use. And that's just one example of having no clue what I was doing. I think things like that really changed when I spoke to this guy called David Goldberg, who runs a company called Pod Management. Really, really awesome guy. And he had to sit down with me and basically said, look, in order for you to grow your business, you need to understand where your time is most valuable, and what other people can do for you. For example, only you right now can understand what the next step of your business is. Only you can get in front of a client and pitch them your service with the convincing story that you have about being a YouTuber. However, whilst you can edit a video, you could pay somebody else to edit a video. Whilst you could write content, you could pay somebody else to write content. But the only way you're ever going to start doing that now is if you start to see your hourly business rate at £100 an hour. And when you said that, I was like, what are you talking about? That's mental. And it was like, well, no, your time is valued at £100 an hour, and a freelance videographer's might be valued at 30, or an editor might be valued at 40, whatever. So even though you may feel like it's a lot of money to spend on those people, it makes sense longer term to spend that on them now, even if you have the time to edit, because ultimately you need to be growing a business. And that was one solid piece of advice that really helped me understand that there were some things that only I should be doing, and a lot of it I should be outsourcing. So that difficulty of not knowing what to work hard on was a tough one. Also, the loneliness element. Like, everyone else has colleagues. I didn't have colleagues. I was just chilling on my ones in Starbucks or Costa, and then eventually a co-working space, which made a huge difference. But even within that, like, you can be physically surrounded by people. You can have people in the same boat. But ultimately, if you're traveling, from Camden to Hammersmith, and making all these journeys on your own, when all you have to comfort yourself is the knowledge that you might be going to get a new client, but also you might not have any clients by the end of the week. There's so much going on in your head, and you've got no idea what's happening. You've got no one to really confide in. For me, I was worried about overburdening my friends with all the information based on what had happened in the YouTube days. I didn't want to make every conversation about me. So I just found it really difficult to navigate that lonely period and not really sharing the experience directly with anyone. So I think those are the two main difficulties.
And I suppose that's really, really interesting, because what you're saying is based on what happened previously of you kind of going on about what you're doing and your friends not feeling like you care about them. So do you feel, and that's why you didn't want to kind of tell them about all the stresses, that clearly you had the stresses. Do you think that you kind of felt then that you needed to turn to like-minded business professionals because they would get it, like mentors? Like what did you do to kind of cope with that then?
Yeah, so that's a really good point. I started reaching out to loads of people and asking them for advice, to saying that, being completely honest, 21, really struggling with whatever it is, and ask for help. And I still do that to this day. Like I mentioned before, I'm really open about everything that's going on in my life. And when I'm struggling with it, you know, that's chilled. I tell people, I don't mind. So I reach out to people often, and some of the time people get back to me. And along my journey, I've been so thankful that some really cool people have actually offered to help me. And more often than not, those 20-minute conversations then turned into like a breakfast and then a lunch. And then, you know, I've been in touch with these people like for a year or two now, and they're great. And I really respect them, and if there's anything I can ever do to help them, I do. So I built some really good relationships out of the fact that I was really lonely and I didn't have much experience to go on.
And young entrepreneurs watching this will be thinking, you know what, that's something that I need to do. So hopefully that'd be a good takeaway for them. So okay, so Joe, I suppose coming to the end of the Videocast podcast. For you then, what does the future hold for WOW? Because obviously you're working with some incredible individuals, James Kahn, Tej Albani, etc. What's the future looking like for you? You know, is this going to be opening up new businesses? Do you want to take WOW internationally? Like, what's the kind of next steps for you now?
It's a really good question. Honest answer is I'm unsure. There are a few different routes that we could go down.
Okay.
We offer quite a premium service, quite a comprehensive service, which allows us to charge a certain price for what we do. And obviously that price is backed up by the results that we get. But ultimately, having the price that we do limits the amount of people who can actually buy the service. So I've been thinking about how we can strip back some of the work we do, make it slightly less kind of all-encompassing, and then reduce the price. I've been thinking about different industries of kind of well-known business people and where they come from, whether it's former athletes, things like that, former musicians. A lot of people who have an audience use that audience to build a business or to monetize in some way. I think Ryan Reynolds is like such a fantastic example of that. But it's not just him. Look at David Beckham and all his businesses. Look at The Rock and all of his different businesses and investments. But what tends to happen with these people, not in their cases, but a lot of the time, it will take a footballer to retire for him to actually realize that he still wants to be in the game in some way. And he had this influence, everyone knew who he was, but now he doesn't have any social following. He doesn't have ownership over a huge amount of people online. So, you know, where is that influence that he once had? So there's definitely an opportunity to get into that kind of spot where people are thinking about the next stages of their career, and they need to somehow pivot their brand from this, you know, great footballer or fun, quirky actor, whatever it is, towards a business person who's looking for investments and things like that. But anyway, I'm just spouting thoughts here in a very public domain, but that's okay. Ultimately, there's a bunch of different routes that we can go down. I'm still not certain on which one is best to the moment, which is why I can't properly answer your question. But those are just some thoughts that I've been having.
And really interesting thoughts, and we will all be following you closely to see how it goes. So Joe, thank you. To kind of finish, you know, we're all in lockdown. I've been asking individuals that I've been talking to if they were kind of like left on an island, middle of nowhere, having to kind of self-isolate like we are at the moment. What would be the 3 things that you'd take with you, and why? If you can kind of finish on that.
Wow. How interesting. So the thing is, if my boyfriend watches this and hears that I didn't say that I would take him on another island, he's fuming. So I guess
fuming, yeah.
off me. What else? I feel like I really like, when I was in Thailand, I loved coconuts. They were just the best fruit ever. They became my number one fruit. And I hope that they wouldn't be on the desert island, would they? Wouldn't take a phone. So I'll take Adam. I'd probably take the clothes that I'm wearing now, because it's my classic quarantine outfit. Maybe a bottle of water, or even a can of water. Shout out to can of water. So,
pretty important, to be honest. But yeah,
if you're being shipped off to desert islands, you've got to have some kind of promo whilst you're out there, because there are going to be a lot of eyes on you. So if I can do a friend a favour and take their can of water product out there, be a lot of eyeballs on what they're doing. So I think that'd be a nice thing to do. I've got Adam, I've got my outfit and can of water.
Okay. And different, but I like it. Okay, Joe, thank you very much.
Alex, you legend. Thank you for having me on here.
Thank you, mate.